So, welcome back to the Defiant Spirit. I'm Baruch Halevi, also known as B, and I am delighted to not only be podcasting to you today, but to be doing so with my good friend, who, if you're watching, you can see she's in the virtual studio with me. And if you're listening, well, I'll just tell you who I'm with. It's Dr. Elise Cortez. How are you, Dr. Elise?
I'm better now. I'm hanging out with you.
Good. Well, it's only been like the second time this week. So, um,
Can't get enough.
let's keep making this a regular occurrence. So, if you haven't listened to one of my podcasts with Dr. Elise, let me just tell you a little bit about who this amazing woman is. Dr. Elise is a logotherapist, among many other things. And those of you who listen to my show know that logotherapy is the school of psychology founded by Dr. Viktor Frankl, meaning centered psychology, but as we like to talk about it, more meaning centered living. And Dr. Elise has really specialized in not only just meaning centered living, but bringing that to the workplace, to our work lives. So she has so many good things going on around meaning and work. If you haven't heard her podcast, Working on Purpose, a tremendous podcast, I think she has 7,000 episodes. So you can binge watch all weekend long. Um, Between Sons of Anarchy and all these other things you're binge watching, make sure Work on Purpose is in there. And also make sure you check out her website over at elisecortez.com, where you can see she's done so much. She's got like so many books out there and great work. And not only that, now she can add to her resume that she's part of the Viktor Frankl Meaning Academy with myself and Dr. Daniel Franz and Dr. Elise. And so we set out to pilot and create this center virtually, but hopefully physically someday, of meaning, purpose, and resilience, and doing some good work together. And that is my friend, Dr. Elise. All right. And yet, in some ways, none of that has to do with our topic today. It's a long lead up for now. Let's change gears and let's go in a different direction, or maybe not. We'll see where it goes. So I had asked Dr. Elise to come on this particular podcast, because I wanted to talk about divorce and a particular take on divorce. I wanted to talk about it as it relates to this thesis of Dr. Frankl's, and one that is near and dear to my heart. His famous quote sums it up: between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and our happiness. And as we always talk about here in the Meaning Academy and the Defiant Spirit, responsibility, the ability to choose our response. And I'm doing a series on this topic, and I wanted to sort of see different issues through the lens of responsibility, the ability to respond. And nothing and nowhere in our life is it more difficult and more important than to learn how to respond when we're facing a divorce, when we're in a divorce, or when we're on the other side of a divorce. And not having gone through divorce personally, my parents divorced, my grandparents divorced, aunts and uncles divorced, my wife's parents divorced. I counsel people through divorce, but nonetheless, I have never personally gone through that particular life cycle event. And I know Elise has. So I wanted to bring Elise on for all those reasons that I led off with, and because of her personal experience with divorce, and also knowing that this is a woman who has really done divorce response ably. So, Dr. Elise, where do we go with this? Maybe you just tell us a little bit about your journey, in particular, how it relates to this topic.
hmm Such a fertile topic. It's so important, and I know there's so many people struggle with this on different levels. So first, I'll share from the context. I come from a home, a family. My mother was married 5 times by the time she was 28, and I was in the second grade. And so I got to do the tour of all of them. And when she hit the last one, she hit the jackpot, and it was really something magical. So I came from a family where I understood the idea of divorce, etc. I did not get married till I was 35, and that was by design. I chose to sort of just wait and tour and live in different parts of the world and pursue my career, etc. And then I had my daughter at 38. So in my husband's family, they're all very intact. Everybody's been together with the same person for like 50 years kind of thing, sort of thing. So anyway, it was a beautiful thing, and I'm really glad that I'm so grateful that I got the opportunity to be married. Um, I was surprised still when he asked me to marry him, and I think it was early 1999 for my birthday. I don't know why I was surprised. We were living in a home that we had purchased together, but I was surprised. And I'm so happy that I said yes. So let me start with that. I got this beautiful life. We moved from Seattle to Dallas in 2002. We had our daughter in 2003. And I got that part of life, which is connected and community oriented and family centric. I got to experience that. So let me just start with that if you want to comment or ask any questions there.
Well, that's a great place to start, because one of the things I see when counseling people through or on the other side of divorce is a natural reaction. And again, our work, I think, in this lifetime is to not give in to the reactions and to defy them by choosing to respond instead. But I understand the natural reaction is to basically invalidate everything, or as they say, throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I've noticed that that's not how you roll in life, but especially around this topic.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right, B. One of the things I always like to say is when I met, so part of the reason I married my husband is because he's Hispanic. He comes from Costa Rica. And you might remember I lived in Spain and Brazil, and I developed this tremendous affinity for the Hispanic culture and the languages. And that was part of my draw to him. But then the winning thing was his parents. I knew in a Hispanic family, I was marrying into the whole family, and I loved his parents. And the four of us used to double date, and it was just so fun. In fact, they followed us from Seattle to Dallas to come when we chose to make that move. It was beautiful. So I had all of these beautiful years and this connection with this family and this expansion into their world and way of living that really did open me. That coming from a traditional American family, we are much more closed in the way that we connect and express ourselves. And Hispanics really have taught me how to open my communication and my heart. So I got all of that as a contribution to myself.
And so holding on to that, right, is, and continues to be important. I know it's easier said than done. I mean, I know you're wired for more of an optimism and a positive worldview. Anybody who's listening, and Elise is an Enneagram 7. She reacts and responds like an Enneagram 7. I don't like telling people that they're a 7, but that's a naturally enthusiastic and optimistic way to look at the world. Were there times when it was not so easy to do, to not sort of want to set fire to the memories, the past, everything that you went through, or was that not the experience?
Oh, yes, this is so good. So let me take you further into the journey. So, it wasn't my idea to get a divorce, but it was a good idea, and it hurt like a son of a gun. Okay. I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was. And it was very painful. It occurred for me the way that it felt to make this really real is it felt like I was being put out on the front curb for bulk trash pickup. I don't want this anymore. Come get it. And that is really what it felt like. It was very devastating. It was very, very, the rejection was so raw. And I would sit in the home by myself before I moved out of it, crying, for weeks and months. I just not understanding what happened, where did this come from, etc. And so I went through a lot of really, really raw, hard emotions for just months. And I remember even just like 5 or 6 months into the separation, we'd even been divorced, and I was working for another company, and I was out on a client site trying to deliver a workshop, and I just fell into a pile of tears. The people that I was supposed to be serving were coming to me and reassuring me and comforting me instead of the other way around, which is the way it was supposed to be. So there were a lot of really, really rocky, tender moments, and you do dumb things because you're hurt and make dumb choices, and you're definitely not reacting well or responding well. So and there were times that I was angry about the whole thing, and mostly because it wasn't my idea, I think. So yeah, to make this a real conversation, I'm happy to go into more of that. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't always pleasant. And now I've been divorced now for 7 years. So the gift of time and healing helps a lot. And
Mhm.
so does that perspective. But yeah, there are definitely some icky times in that.
Well, that's why, it's so important to have these conversations because it's so easy. Theory is so easy to say, don't react, learn to respond. However, reaction is coming from a place of primal fear, right?
Hmm.
Core fundamental human fears of abandonment and betrayal and
Yeah.
exposure
Hmm.
and death on so many levels. And so, divorce is in some ways, I think it's more, having um, only guided people through it. What I've witnessed is in some ways it's harder than death because most death, unless it's a suicide, isn't a choice, right?
Hmm.
Somebody leaves you, your spouse leaves you, but because of no fault of their own, they die. There's not that personal piece of it. But the other piece is it's black and white. They're here, they're gone. And what I see with divorce is there's so many shades of gray. It's not black, it's not white. They're still alive, they're moving on, they're marrying. I'm still tied to them through a daughter. Like it's just so complicated.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to it. That's right. I think what I'm hearing you say when you distinguish death and divorce is, death is black and white and final, and divorce, it has all these shades and nuances and turns and twists, etc., and that go on, and it lives with you. Um, so in my case, I don't see him hardly ever at all, and I don't have really any occasion to communicate with him either,
Mhm.
which is clean. And he has since remarried. I haven't. Um, so, but the other part of that, though, is that I think we also want to be sure and presence in this conversation is what happened when in the divorce process for me, and I think it's an opportunity for everyone who goes through it, is the clearing that presented itself for me to step into,
Mhm.
and that I got to become more of who I really wanted to become and didn't feel like I could when I was married, not because there was anything that he said or did that prevented it. It was just part of my own structure.
Mhm.
But I also got to pursue things like becoming an author and creating this series of programs for organizations that don't think I would have ever really fully pursued in that arrangement of marriage that I was in. Again, not because didn't allow it or anything. It just wasn't available for me through who I was.
Many things to pull out of that. One is I hate our limited words, that oftentimes we have to describe the experience. So we call it divorce, for instance, just like retirement, right? Retirement doesn't really accurately reflect what most people do because they don't withdraw. That's what retire means.
Right.
They go on to something else. Well, divorce isn't really true either because you already said, yeah, you may have had a clean break in some ways, but you share a daughter,
Hmm.
right? There's a human being in this world because of that union, and you're not divorced. If we mean by that as a legal term, but emotionally, spiritually, there's so many different layers that continue.
Hmm.
Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely, absolutely. And what I like to think of it as and this is something that is just, I think I got present to this term back in 2012 when I was doing some postdoc meaning and work and identity research. But the term that I feel most applicable for this whole process is unfoldment.
Mm,
And this feeling of, there's I have unfolded in this process. I have really in many ways blossomed in this process. And part of that is it's the necessary cutting of life that it's a catalyzing force. I mean, you call it the shattering, and I did experience that shattering where everything that I really thought I knew just fell away and crashed to the floor. And in that shattering, I got access to other parts of myself that I otherwise couldn't see. I didn't know they existed. I didn't know how to touch them, how to
mhm.
presence them. But it was so that breaking was necessary.
Oh God, I'm like overwhelmed by how many things there are to talk about. But one of them is the shattering. In Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, the primary image of our understanding of God is not parent and child, which is usually how we sort of think of God in religious terms, but it's spouses, husband, traditionally husband and wife. And that union, and when you consummate that, when you come into marriage from a mystical perspective, it's the highest expression in this lifetime of touching upon divinity. And
Mhm.
so divorce or uncoupling or unfolding has a shattering quality. I
Mhm.
imagine, again, I want to be sensitive, not having gone through it, but I imagine this sort of existential, spiritual undoing in some ways that no other experience can have upon us. So my heart really does break, and I have nothing but empathy for people going through it, but I see it, just how deep, dark, and shattering it can be.
Yeah, and two things on that. One is, it's interesting. I don't know what the divorce rates are these days, but I think it's at least, I heard some stat that, it's well over, it is over 50%. And then if a second marriage ends like 65% of the time, and a third marriage like 75% of the time, something like that. So it's interesting to me when you think about how it seems like more frequently that divorce is occurring among the population. So you would start asking yourself, why would that be? And so I do think that there is probably something about maybe people not valuing, that what you're talking about, this longer connective sort of road that is available within the institution of marriage. Um, the other thing that I forgot now what this, the other thing about the sharing that I wanted to say about that. Um, well, I guess I know is really, when you think about, I really do believe that there is a relationship between the size of pain or trauma that you go through and the opportunity to grow and develop as a result of it. It's
Yes.
directly related.
Yeah.
And I used to always say, in my life, I used to say, I'm probably never going to amount to too much because I haven't really gone through a lot in life.
Mm. Be
I used
careful what
to
you.
I used to say that, and I will say that the divorce helped me in that. It gave me something to deal with in life in a way that I hadn't had to deal with something before on a number of levels, financially, professionally, socially. And it was so catalyzing, and I do think the opportunity, as you and I have talked about, because I do exhibit as a seven enthusiast on the Enneagram. I can be a little light in my approach, but because I also feel very deeply like a four individualist, I mean I can take on and just descend into the cauldrons of the pain of this thing. And I think that stewing is really necessary, really important part of the healing and the process of understanding what the experience of divorce is, what's available within it. You have to feel all that stuff. And emotions are energy in motion. That energy and those emotions have to go someplace. So stewarding it through your person is so important. So I never want to gloss over that just because on the other side of this has given me such a fertile place to realize more of my fuller potential, that it wasn't incredibly painful for a long time for me to get there.
Well, I don't want you or anybody to chalk this up to your four that gave you that capacity. I think that that is part of sort of what draws you to going into the shattering and mining it for meaning.
Yeah.
But I want to say, and I heard it earlier in what you were talking about, it's the defiant power of your human spirit, of Elisa's spirit, that you said, I'm going to make my stand
Yeah.
on in this shattering, and I'm not going to miss this opportunity to mine it for meaning. I don't want it, right? I don't want when somebody dies, I don't want the suffering. Frankel would say, never go looking for it because that's just masochism and you'll never find meaning. But you don't have to go looking for it, right? Because you'll say to life, I've had it so easy, and life will say, okay, Elise, right? Okay. And then
Mhm.
the shattering comes, and then you have a decision, a choice. And what I heard you say many times is, whether it was conscious or unconscious, I'm going to make my defiant stand in this shattering, and I'm going to make it yield meaning. That's what I heard.
Absolutely be. And the other thing that is really a big part of my messaging and what I stand for is this whole notion of, you have one precious life and you don't know when the exit ramp is coming. So what are you going to do with it? And both of my parents passed 28 days apart in January of 2019. So it became even more profound for me. This thing isn't forever, and let's make the most of it, the best of it. So what that does is it gives me a sense of urgency to fulfill on my own dreams and everything else that I want to become and do and experience in the world. And so it gives me like a focus. It gives me it also gives me a lot of energy and drive, and I choose how I spend my time accordingly. So I'm opting into what's allowing me to get where I want to go next. What's the next book I'm writing? What's the next program I want to put on to help people? And I opt away from things that I feel like aren't going to help get me there, or people that are not going to help get me there. So there is so much agency in this when we tap it.
So let's go back to that moment when you're in your shattering and it's easier said than done to do all this defiant work, make your defiant stand. You're back in it. And I understand, when somebody's in it, then they're in the fear and they're in the, feeling like, what was your word, that you were on the curb as
Put
trash,
out for bulk trash pickup.
right?
That's exactly what it felt like. Yeah.
So, that's when it's totally understandable to, well, another teacher of mine. Are you familiar with Edith Eger, Eger?
Mm-mm.
She was a Holocaust survivor. She was a student of Frankel's as well. She wrote two books, one called The Gift and one called The Choice. Amazing woman. She's in her 90s now. Anyway, she says the difference between being a survivor or victim and a survivor is that, we're all victimized in different ways at different times. Ain't none of us getting out of here alive. So we're all victimized, but then we have a choice. And do we remain in that place? And she calls that the victimhood. Do we take up residence in that place, the
Mhm.
victimhood? Or, do we become a survivor? And she says the difference between being a victim and a survivor is a victim says, why me? And a survivor says, now what?
Mhm.
And I can
Mhm.
hear that moment for you of like, I can sit on the curb, justified. I am not saying when somebody chooses to remain on the curb, it's not justified. But the question becomes, where agency, the issue becomes agency. And if you're sitting on the curb waiting either to be picked up by the garbage truck or rescued by somebody or something, right? Then it's why me? And I'm powerless. And what I heard you say is I went into sort of a now what?
No question. In fact, B, this is interesting. I used to have on my desk for many years when I was married, what will you do with your one precious life? And there were many times when I was still married that I would have to turn that plaque over because I couldn't look at it because I knew I was not living to my fuller potential. I knew I wasn't pursuing what I really wanted to pursue in my life that would make me feel whole and complete and full and expressed, and that my life and my contribution had been meaningful. So yeah, so I mean, I felt like I had set up my own like prison bars in this thing. So again, once those literally those theoretical or invisible bars left because of the marriage, I literally it was like, gosh, at least you can go anywhere, you can do anything. And then now my daughter is off to college, and I really have a clear. She's on her, for all intents and purposes, she's on her own and doing great. And so I have this whole space in my life. It's like an open, empty canvas, and that's how it occurs for me. Is wow, what can I do with this? What can I make with this? And I feel like, gosh, I want to live abroad again, and I keep working on my language so that I continue to do all that and find spaces and opportunities and meet new people for other ways. So yes, it feels to me, it occurs for me as an invitation, a beckoning. Okay, Cortez, what's happening next? Where are you going next?
Hmm. That's a big shift for somebody on the other side of divorce. And I've likened it to driving, either looking through the windshield or the rear view mirror. Because what I hear you saying, and that's, I guess, as I'm putting it together, what Dr. Eger was saying is why me is the rear view mirror. Now what is the windshield? Where am I going? What's next? Because what I see happen, understandably, but something to stand guard against when you're going through divorce, is becoming fixated on the rear view mirror, on
Mhm.
what was, on all that's behind me. And that rear view mirror is a fraction of the size of the windshield. And it's also, it's a good way to get into the next car crash. If you're
Right.
driving, looking backwards.
Right.
And so I can hear that energy, that shift of we've got to take our eyes and attention away from the rearview mirror from the past. We've got to put it through the windshield. Like, where am I going? And I hear that that's key of, your responding to your divorce.
Yeah, and I think a key for that, B, which I know you'll appreciate, is it is honoring and celebrating the past. So I like to look at what my experience of what it was for me to be married, which was from age 35 to 51, it was a chapter in my life. And I look at the events that happened in that chapter, and I'm so grateful I got those things. I love that I got to walk my daughter to and from elementary school all the days that she went to school, and she remembers those things. And I love that I got to be the president of Lakewood Service League and the chair of the board of the YMCA. All of those things kind of came with that sort of life. And I was just talking to a friend that, this Tuesday. Thanksgiving used to be a major thing for me, and I would have like 100 people over for Thanksgiving, and it was just this whole communal sort of thing. And all those things got to happen in that chapter of my life. And now I feel like there's this whole other chapter about, do you know how long author sat on my resolution list before it actually happened? Years. So now I have 4 books out, and there's another few that are being written. Okay, so that's all these chapters that are progressing, and starting a nonprofit, that was something else. So what I think about is, okay, so that part of my life was a chapter in my life, and there were so many good things that happened with and for that. And yet there's all these other great things that I'm not even sure yet that I have been able to come up with or imagine yet, or who knows what all this could be. So I get really excited by the possibilities. Maybe that's just part of the way that I navigate life, but I also am I'm an ambitious, energetic person. And people who know me say, you're an incredible self-starter. And I am. I mean, I don't need anybody to tell me to tap me on the shoulder to go after these things. Why? Because I want to realize as much of my person as I possibly can in the precious time that I get on this planet.
So crucial that you really named what I see people especially in the immediate aftermath of a divorce, need to take to heart. If you're listening to this, there's nothing more important than to, again, not throw it all away,
Yes.
make it all wrong, turn them
Right.
into the other, make them evil. I see a powerlessness with that, because what you're doing is you're giving away your power. Like, I challenge people going through divorce, hold on to the love. Like, don't
Mhm.
throw that away, or the good memories like you're describing. Don't give that power to your ex to take that from you.
Right. Completely agree with that, B. Yeah.
And it's just so easy. And look, it's natural. It's natural to say, that's my point, to set it on fire. Fuck it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
out. You don't deserve. But, Frankel talks about memories are achieved, they're earned, they're real. The, future and dreams are speculative, they're maybes. But memories, we think of memories as like, oh, it's something gone, as opposed to, I'm a guardian of that love, of that memory. And nobody gets to take that. That's powerful.
It is powerful. And, to your point, I also see this happen all the time, where when somebody gets divorced, the other person suddenly becomes like the biggest asshole on the planet. Well, hold on a minute. You were married to that asshole on the planet for a lot of years. Wait, what happened to your judgment here? you know, so so there is a tendency to demonize, and the reason we demonize is because we're still hurt. We
Yeah.
haven't worked through things, and that's so it is a natural part of the process. And yet when you can recognize, things, and you say this too, things, there is a beginning, a middle, and an end to most everything. And that seems to be true for relationships too. And one thing that I've learned so much, B, and this has been interesting reflecting on this. I have a friend that I run with every Tuesday, and he's dealing with an 87-year-old father that's really got some health issues and is married. And his wife is like really just happy to send him away to the assisted living so she doesn't have to deal with it anymore. And he's like flabbergasted by this. He's just so undone by this. And I'm like, here's the thing. I mean, there's not a very fine, not a thick line between love and some, and really hate and all these other awful things that happen. I mean, how often is it when, we say we love someone and then all of a sudden we do things that really hurt them, or, the people kill in the name of love or on the other side of love. And so I've really come to this understanding of this through line of love and connection and relationships that populate the fullness of our lives. And when you understand that, at least my experience of understanding it the way that I have so far, it it makes it more, you're more able to forgive or let go of the person that hurt you on the other side of the love spectrum.
Totally. And, Elie Wiesel is the one who famously said the opposite of love is not hate or anger, it's indifference.
Indifference, exactly.
Because it's energy. Anger's energy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people act, they'll say, and I'm counseling them in divorce, I hate them, I don't feel anything towards them. You can't have both.
Right.
Right?
Right.
To feel nothing is to feel nothing. And I'm not saying that's the goal. All I'm saying is when you're using that energy, you're not using it for something else, right? You're putting it in the rearview mirror. Can we learn how to take back that energy, back that power, right? To not give it away to anger, to them, to whatever. Can we repurpose it? Can we move forward? And you're an example of somebody who consciously or unconsciously, you did this. You took your energy and you repurposed it. Because I could understand, and people could understand if 7 years later you were still talking about how angry you were that it didn't work out. Like nobody would say you're ridiculous for doing that. It would be understandable. I don't think it would be good for you. We wouldn't have those books behind you,
Right.
but you could have.
Hmm. Yeah. What I'm present to for myself is, how much I've learned from the whole experience. And I think that's really a lot of it. If you can look at what's here for me to learn. I mean, I can look at my role and how it, what contributed to the divorce. I mean, I absolutely handily had a role in this whole thing. I contributed to that. And I've learned a lot about myself and who I am and how I've faltered and failed in that process. Not to the point where I'm saying, oh my gosh, it was all my fault. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I understand how I contributed to it. And now what's been interesting, B, is now in my connections and relationships going forward, they are the beneficiaries of that because I've learned how to be different in relationship because of what I learned from failing at it. And I think it makes me a better person. It makes me a better friend. It makes me a better person to be in relationship with. And I'm more choiceful about that now.
So the only way to get to responsibility, the ability to choose our response, is to take responsibility, right, for what's ours.
Right.
And that's powerful because otherwise, if somebody says they did this to me, then you're a victim in that marriage and you have no agency, you have no power. But for
Right.
you to go back and say, this was mine, right? That means I'm taking my agency and I'm going to own that. But you also said something so important, which is it's also responsibility means taking, stock of what's yours, but not taking stock of what's not yours.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And that was so important because in the very beginning, B, when it all had gone down, it was one of those kind of things where the way it happened was he had been gone for business for 3 weeks in December of 2015, and within 2 days of coming back, he basically he said, really don't want to be married anymore, and he didn't want to come back to the house, etc. And so there was this whole notion of in the first few weeks or months, I really was like, I really saw that from that perspective, that angle of if this was all my fault. I'm the one, because I was hearing what he was saying to me and taking it in like this is all my fault. I caused this to happen. And that is not productive. It was a necessary part of my process. And I obviously have come around to the other side where I can see how both of us contributed to this. But yes, I mean, there is an agency if if you just like, oh, if I hadn't done this, we'd still be together or whatever. Well, I actually am pretty happy that we're not together because of who I get to be when I'm not in that relationship. But yeah, I did go through a period where, I beat myself up and down one side or the other, man, bloody to the core here of what I did wrong and what I contributed to that. And it wasn't productive.
That is the Enneagram 4 right there, right? Is taking on that on. And my work with fours, I have a son who's a four, Ariel is a four, and I have a few clients who are fours, is to not get them to own what's not theirs. This is the work of that four, because they naturally go to sort of a masochistic, I call it emotional cutting place.
Yeah.
And so not, and what I always talk to them about is it's irresponsible to take responsibility for what's not yours.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's what I can hear somebody like you has had to do, is owning what's mine is easy, but not owning what's not mine is not easy. And so I can tell you've done a lot of work around that. And people listening, it's just so important. And it's a dance. It's not like easy, clear lines between what's mine and what's not mine, but this is the work.
Yeah.
Right? This is the work of growth.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that inspired me to do this podcast and then reach out to you was I'm working with a couple right now who's doing what you might call conscious unfoldment, right? Or conscious divorcing, because they wanted to see if they could do this in the most loving, respectful way possible to get to this place where you're at. And I just think it gives me so much hope in working with them. And I hope they listen to this and other people listen to this, to know that even if you don't go through a conscious divorce, because lots of divorces by definition are unconscious, there's hope. And if you do go through a conscious divorce, probably even easier to get to this place where you are, Dr. Elise.
Well, I have a lot of respect and admiration for the couple you're talking about. That would be wonderful to start to see that wave happen. There is obviously the mediated divorce, et cetera, but that sounds much more, especially if I guess that's the opportunity. If you both come at it together, and what happens invariably though is it's usually one party who wants the divorce, and the other one doesn't, or doesn't want it that way. And so if you can get to the place where, okay, we're doing this, we're going to go separate, it's going to happen, and we do it in a way that is loving and to set each of them free, that would be incredible to witness or to help make happen. That would be amazing.
That's why I do call it responsible divorce, the ability to choose our response, whether or not we have a partner who wants to consciously unfold, I like your word, or whether it's a horrific scenario. This is all about taking back our power. And all we can ever control is our response. And you are just such a great example for people who are facing it, considering it, in it, on the other side of it, that there is no such thing as divorce. There's your approach to your life, and that's your respective divorce is like nobody else's that ever was, is, or will be. So, this isn't to say that Dr. Elise's template can be just laid over your life, because that's not how it works, but drawing inspiration from the fact that there are people who have gone through it and are on the other side of it and are as responsible as you is really truly inspiring. So thank you for opening your heart and making this time and sharing with my audience.
Very welcome, Bea. It's such an important thing to talk about, and it's taboo for a lot of people. So I appreciate that you're making it relevant, accessible, and real.
Elise, I live to talk about the taboo stuff. I'm an Enneagram 8, right?
I know. You do it so well.
I used to call myself an elephant hunter before it was not PC to say that. The elephant in the room. Let's get into it, right?
I know. Yeah.
So now I'm an elephant whisperer. But anyways, we're going to keep whispering about the tough and the difficult topics here, and I can't wait to have you back on my podcast for 1,000 other reasons. So
thanks, Bea. You're a gift to the world.
And anybody listening, jump over to Elise's website, Elise, ALISE Cortez.com. You can learn more about her. You can also go to themeaningacademy.com, where you'll also find some information about her and a link to her website. So stay tuned. We got some good stuff hopefully coming up in the new year. Dr. Elise, myself, and Dr. Dan are mapping out what it might be to go on a journey with the three of us called Your Search for Meaning, inspired by, of course, our shared love of our teacher, Dr. Viktor Frankl, and his book, Man's Search for Meaning. So stay tuned for that and more. And until the next time, live with purpose, meaning, and resilience. We'll talk to you then. Bye-bye. Thanks, Elise.
Thank you.